All right, today we're talking about experiments, surveys, and observational studies. Now, some of these are very similar. We have some vocabulary words we're going to talk about in just a minute. And we're also going to distinguish between correlation and causation, and bias and unbiased, and what a population and what a sample is. A bunch of different just informations about these. They'll have some definitions here. So, new vocabulary. The first thing is a survey. So what is a survey? A survey is an opinion-based question, like, what is your favorite ice cream? Observational study. Observational study looks at results of something that did happen. Like, we could go back and look at how many days did it rain in May? Or how many days did it rain over the last 10 Mays? And get an idea of what it's like in May in terms of rain. And then we have an experiment. This is observe some sort of an experiment, something that's going to happen in the future. How many walkers are there the day after it rains? I don't have that information. I would have to study that. So I'd have to wait for the next day that it rains and start counting up how many walkers there are. See if that changes compared to a normal day or something of that nature. But it's something that I have to go ahead and do with an experiment. An observational study is I'm looking at results that have already been there. And then the survey is very opinion-based. All right, let's look at some more information. So we have a population. Now, when we do a survey, I'm sure you've seen people doing surveys. They don't survey everybody. So when they go ahead and, the presidential election from last time with Hillary and Trump is a great example of this. All the surveys that were being done were saying that Mrs. Clinton was going to go ahead and win the election. She had the more popular vote and all that, but they weren't asking every person in America. Every person in America was the population. They were just asking a small sample of that, and that sample actually was not indicative of the population because President Trump is now our president. So a survey represents a population, but most of the time we only just do a sample of it. We can't do all of it. Now, like if we wanted to do a survey of what's your favorite hot lunch at Grant Park, yeah, we can do that. We got 150 kids, no big deal. But I could also ask the class and then guess what the favorite is by what the results in the class are. What's in the class would be the sample, but the population would be all of Grant Park, even though I don't survey all of them. All right. So most of the time, the sample is supposed to represent some sort of population. Biased and unbiased. There's many ways of having a bias kind of a question. A survey that changes the results because it's a loaded question. For example, if I went ahead and sat outside, when we actually had sports, people watching sports and attending. If I went outside of a Bears game a couple of years ago and asked them who their favorite football team was, I'm going to get a lot of results in terms of the Chicago Bears. If I go ahead and ask people outside of Culver's who their favorite ice cream place is, those are loaded questions because of how I question it or where I'm at. So we get some biased questions. We really want our questions to be unbiased. They're non-assuming questions. So, these are things that we have to be aware of when we're doing these kind of experiments, surveys, and observational studies. And then correlation versus causation. A correlation is two items that behave similarly, like the ice cream and sunglasses sales. If you actually plotted them like over the course of months, they actually seem very similar. Ice cream is sold a lot more in the summer. Sunglasses are sold a lot more in the summer. Well, why is that? Because it's hotter out. People are being outside more. They just happen to have those kind of correlation between each other. They seem very similar. Okay, one does not cause the other though. Causation, one item has an effect on the other. So like muscle fatigue and working out. Well, if I work out, I will have muscle fatigue. That's how it's supposed to work. And so, but the thing of working out makes the muscle fatigue. I wouldn't have muscle fatigue if I wasn't working out. Okay. ice cream sales does not go up because sunglasses sales went up. Okay, there's some other causation there. All right, so those are the differences. So now we're just going through a bunch of examples. State whether the following problem would produce a random sample. Surveying people going to an action movie to find out what their most popular kind of movie is. No, because you're asking people that are already invested in an action movie. They're not going to be unbiased. They're going to be biased on what they do because of where you're located. State whether the following method would produce a random sample, calling every 10th person on a list. Calling every 10th person tends to be a random sample because you don't know what that 10th person is. And so you're just asking about the quality of the survey. Just by the simple fact that it's the list on the newspaper doesn't necessarily mean much because that's the population that you're trying to do. So you're calling every 10th person in the population. And so that brings us to the population. The population is the survey for the newspaper. What's the sample? It's every 10th person. So they're not asking everyone, but they're doing enough of it to hopefully get an idea of what everyone is. Conducting an online survey to determine the percent of people that use travel agents. I could see both ways on this one. This one could be no one because you're not asking anyone in particular, just asking everyone that's online. But if you know a little bit about travel agents, the biggest thing that is putting travel agents out of business is the fact that you can do a lot of things online booking. So does that mean that if you're comfortable being online and answering surveys, aren't you comfortable enough booking your own stuff so you don't really need a travel agent? So it depends on how you look at it, and sometimes the question is that way. So the people surveyed online are less likely to actually use a travel agent. So depending upon your justification of it, you could argue either way. Say whether the following method would be random. People going to a football game to find the most popular sport. No, because they're already at a football game. Every 5th person going into a movie theater, going into a mall about their movie. So that one's fine. There's no bias because it's every 5th person. Conducting an online survey to determine the percent of people who own fish as pets. There's no obvious bias on this one. People online do not know more fish than the people that aren't online. All right, which question will determine the most popular spectator sport? So this is, again, kind of looking at our bias. Isn't football an exciting sport to watch? You're leading in to making a comment about football. What's your favorite one to watch? Do you like to watch tennis matches? Again, that's, it's giving them something to focus in on. So B, of course, is our unbiased question. Which one would be the best question to determine the most popular dessert? It's just what's your favorite dessert to eat? All right, experiments and observational studies and surveys too, but find 100 students and randomly split them into 2 groups. One group walks to school and the other group does not. So this is something that's going to happen in the future. We've split it up. We do not have results already. So this is very much an experiment that's going to go ahead and happen. Next one. Find 100 students, half of whom who work after school, compare their grade point averages. So we can go ahead and find these people, half who work after school, and then we can go ahead and look up their grade point averages. Their grade point averages are already there. It is something that has already happened. This is an observational study. Find 100 students, half of whom play sports after school, compare their numbers of siblings. Again, this is something that has already happened. We're just going to look up the results. So it's an observational study. Find 100 students, randomly split them into 2 groups. One group eats breakfast and the other one does not. This is an experiment for whatever it is you're trying to go ahead and do. You want to find out if jogging increases muscle mass. So this is probably going to be some sort of an experiment. You could go ahead and say observational study if you have a lot of data already, but you probably don't have a starting point. So I don't agree with this observational study. This is much more of an experiment. You want to find out who are the most popular teachers in school. Again, this is opinion, so we're talking about a survey. And we know who it is. It's always your math teacher. You want to test a vaccine for cats. So again, probably an experiment. Now, if the vaccine has been out and you want to see how it did, that would be an observational study. But this is probably an experiment as you're testing them out. You want to find out if playing years of soccer affects lung capacity. So you could go ahead and take a look at those people that have played soccer and those that haven't, and check the observation. It would be an observational study because you can find people that have played soccer for years, and you can find people that don't, and compare their lung capacity. You want to find out the most popular movie for the last 2 months. Anything that's popular is a survey. You want to determine if eating a salty food makes you thirsty. So that's an experiment. Give them salty food. Are you more thirsty or less thirsty? Tides are higher during a full moon. Causation versus correlation. The moon causes tides. If you don't know that, that does happen. There would be no tides if there wasn't a moon. So the moon affects that, so that's a causation. Laboratory mice deprived of sleep have a lower average weight. Are all mice the only kind of mice that can have a lower weight are those that are deprived of sleep? There are mice that are probably full of sleep and have low weight. They may be very similar, but one does not cause the other. It's not the only cause. If I change this, does it mean that this has to change? And that's no. Okay, there can be some deprived sleep mice that are heavy. People who live in cities drink more bottled water. Because you live in a city, do you have to drink more bottled water? I don't think so. You can drink, because you live in a city, it does not mean you have to. This is a correlation. People who live on farms are more likely to know how to ride a horse. Again, a correlation. You don't have to ride a horse if you live on a farm. I know there's plenty of people in Grand Park that have never ridden a horse. Extra parking lot from your apartment complex will reduce the time spent searching for a parking spot. That's a causation. If you have more parking, it's a lot easier to find parking spots. New fire station is built 3 blocks down from the street will reduce the response time. Yeah, if you got a closer fire, they'll respond a lot faster. And that's what I have for you.